We believe we live in an age of total knowledge, an age of surveillance, satellites, and data. We have mapped the human genome and photographed the edge of the abyss. We carry devices in our pockets that connect us to the sum of human understanding. We have drawn lines on every continent, plumbed the deepest trenches, and left footprints on another world. We have built an illusion of control, the illusion that everything is known or can be known. But this is a lie. Our map of reality is not complete. It is a fragile document, riddled with voids. These are not just blank spaces. They are erasures, black holes in our history where logic collapses, where science fails, and where people simply vanish. These are not simple missing persons cases. These are not tragedies that can be explained by weather, misfortune, or human malice. These are impossibilities, logical paradoxes, written in the language of fear, ice, and stone. Today on 0 Point Lore, we are not just telling ghost stories. We are opening 3 of the most profound and terrifying case files in modern history. 3 mysteries that represent a fundamental 0 point in our understanding of the world. We will investigate the frozen terror that descended on 9 experienced hikers in the Ural Mountains. We will search for an entire colony of 117 people that evaporated from the New World. And we will stand in an empty lighthouse, haunted by a single, impossible clue. These are the stories of those who stepped out of our world and into the void. February 1959. The height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union is a superpower, a nation defined by scientific progress and industrial might. In this world of technological certainty, 9 students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnical Institute embark on an expedition. They are not amateurs. They are seasoned, Grade 3 hikers, the highest certification possible. They are engineers, physicists, and athletes. Led by 2 3-year-old Igor Dyatlov, they are the best of the best. Their goal is Croatoan Mountain, a brutal, remote peak in the northern Urals. To get there, they must cross a high mountain pass. The name of that pass, in the language of the local Mansi tribe, is Kolatsiakal. It means dead mountain. On the 1st of February, they are forced by worsening weather to make camp on the eastern slope of Dead Mountain. It is a strange decision. They are experienced. They know it is safer to camp in the tree line, just a mile and a half down the slope. But for some reason, they stop here, on this exposed, barren hillside. It is the last decision they will ever make. In the photos and journals recovered from their last camp, there is no sign of distress. They are cold, but in good spirits. They eat a meal and prepare for sleep. The temperature outside plunges to -30 degrees Celsius. 9 people enter the tent. None will come out alive. When they failed to send a telegram by their scheduled date, search parties were dispatched. On February 26th, what the searchers found was not a tragedy. It was a riddle. The tent was half buried in snow, but it was not an avalanche that destroyed it. It had been bizarrely cut and ripped open. From the inside, something or someone inside that tent was so terrified, so desperate to escape, that they used a knife to slash their way out into the lethal, sub-zero darkness. But what they fled from was apparently not as terrifying as what they fled into. The searchers found a trail of footprints, 9 sets, leading down the slope towards the forest. The footprints were a map of pure panic. They showed the hikers had fled in a desperate, disorganized line, and they were barefoot, or wearing only socks. In 30 below zero weather, this was not a rational evacuation. This was a primal, mindless flight. They ran nearly a mile, downhill, until they reached the tree line and the relative shelter of a giant, ancient cedar. There, the first 2 bodies were found, Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonyshenko. They were found lying next to the remains of a small fire. They were stripped down to their underwear. Their hands were burned and scraped raw. Branches on the cedar tree were broken up to 15 feet high, suggesting one of them had frantically tried to climb it. Why? To escape something on the ground? Or to look back? Back towards the silent, dark tent on the hillside. The next 3 bodies were found scattered between the cedar tree and the tent. Igor Dyatlov, the leader. Zinaida Kolmogorova, Rustem Slobodin. Their position suggested they were fighting, crawling, trying to return to the tent. But they never made it. Slobodin was found with a 17-centimeter fracture in his skull, yet no external wound to indicate a blow. And the last 4 hikers? They were missing. For 2 agonizing months, the search continued, as the deep winter snows began to melt. In May, the remaining 4 were found, buried under 13 feet of snow in a makeshift den in a ravine, 75 meters from the cedar tree. They were Lyudmila Dubinina, Alexander Zolotaryov, Nikolai Thibaut Brignoles, and Semyon Zolotaryov. And it is here, in this dark ravine, that the mystery of Dyatlov Pass ceases to be a tragedy and becomes an impossibility. The first 4 hikers who died of hypothermia were a tragedy. The last 4 were something else entirely. Nikolai Thibaut Brignoles had suffered a massive, crushing skull fracture. Alexander Zolotaryov and Lyudmila Dubinina had catastrophic, symmetrical chest trauma. Multiple ribs on both sides were shattered. The force required to inflict such injuries was described by the lead investigator, Dr. Boris Vozrojdeny, as equivalent to the force of a car crash or a high-speed impact. And yet, here is the impossibility. There were no external wounds, no bruising, no soft tissue damage, no sign of a fight or a fall or an impact. It was as if they had been crushed by an immense, invisible force. The horror deepens. When the body of Lyudmila Dubinina was examined, it was found that her tongue was missing. So were her eyes and parts of her lips. The official investigation was baffled. They had 9 dead bodies and a set of facts that contradicted each other. Let us examine the theories. Theory 1, an avalanche. This is the official, modern explanation. A slab avalanche struck the tent, forcing them to cut their way out and flee. This theory fails. The tent was not buried. It was erected on poles, which were still standing. The hikers' own tracks were visible. The slope was not steep enough for a major avalanche. And most importantly, an avalanche crushes. It does not leave catastrophic internal injuries while leaving the skin and clothes untouched. Theory 2. Infrasound. A rare natural phenomenon called a Kármán vortex street, where wind moving over the mountain peak created a low-frequency sound, inaudible to the human ear, but capable of inducing intense, irrational panic and terror. This is a compelling explanation, but if for the panic, it could explain why they fled. But it does not explain the radiation. It does not explain the crushed ribs. It does not explain the missing tongue. Theory 3. A military test. This is the persistent, whispered theory that the hikers stumbled into a secret Soviet weapons test. This would explain the secrecy, the sudden closure of the case, and the strange, unearthly injuries. It would explain the radiation found on some of the victims' clothing. It would explain the reports from other hikers in the region of strange orange spheres in the sky that very night. But what weapon? What device is capable of inducing panic, crushing bodies from the inside out, and leaving traces of radiation, all without a single explosion? The official verdict was a compelling natural force. A meaningless phrase. The Dyatlov Pass Incident is a logical paradox. The evidence for an avalanche contradicts the evidence for a military weapon, which contradicts the evidence for a natural phenomenon. Each fact cancels the others out, leaving a void, a 0 point. 9 brilliant young people walked onto that mountain. What they met there did not belong to our world, and it did not leave survivors. If Dyatlov is a mystery of impossible evidence, our next case is a mystery of impossible absence. A case where the void itself is the only clue. We travel back in time to 1587. England is locked in a desperate war with the Spanish Empire. Queen Elizabeth I needs a foothold in the New World, a base, a privateering port, a new beginning. She tasks Sir Walter Raleigh with establishing a permanent colony. He calls it Virginia. We call it Roanoke. This was not just a military outpost. This was a town. 117 men, women, and children, led by Governor John White. They arrived on Roanoke Island, in what is now North Carolina, and began to build a home. They rebuilt the fortifications of a failed previous expedition. They forged alliances with some local tribes, like the Croatoan, and made enemies of others. On August 18, 1587, history was made. Governor White's daughter, Eleanor Dare, gave birth to a baby girl, Virginia Dare. The first English child born in the New World. There was hope, but there was also desperation. Supplies ran critically low. The colony needed support from the homeland. Governor John White was an artist and a leader, not a soldier. He made the agonizing decision to return to England, to plead with the Queen for a relief fleet. He left behind 117 souls, his daughter, his granddaughter. He promised he would return, but history intervened. As White arrived in England, the Spanish Armada launched. The full might of Spain descended on the English Channel. All-out war erupted. Every seaworthy vessel was commandeered for the defense of the realm. John White was trapped for 1 year, then 2, then 3 years. He fought to secure a ship, to gather supplies, to get back to his family. Finally, in August of 1590, 3 long years after he left, his ship dropped anchor at Roanoke Island. He wrote in his journal that as they approached, they saw smoke rising from the woods. They blew a trumpet, sang English songs, hoping for an answer. The woods were silent. When they landed, they walked to the settlement, and what they found was nothing. This was not a scene of destruction. This was not a massacre. There were no bodies, no bones, no graves. There were no signs of a fire or a battle. The entire colony, the houses, the fortifications, the storage sheds, the 117 people who lived in them was gone. It had not been destroyed. It had been dismantled, erased. As White and his men walked through the empty clearing, in a state of shock, they found their only clue. Carved into a post at the entrance to the former settlement was a single, cryptic word: Croatoan. On a nearby tree, they found the letters C-R-O. This was the clue White had been waiting for. Before he left, he had arranged a signal with the colonists. If they had to move, they were to carve their destination into a post. If they were in distress, they were to add a Maltese cross. There was no cross. Croatoan was the name of a nearby island, what we now call Hatteras Island, and the name of the friendly Native American tribe that lived there, led by their chief, Manteo. The story seems simple then. They were not in distress. They simply packed up and moved to live with their allies. But this is where the simple explanation unravels. If they moved, why did they dismantle the entire town? Why not just leave? This act implies a long, laborious, organized process. And how does a group of 117 English men, women, and children, including educated people, mothers, and the elderly, assimilate so completely, so perfectly, into a Native American tribe that they leave zero definitive archaeological trace? For centuries, archaeologists and historians have searched Croatoan Island. They have found Native American artifacts. They have even found a few scattered European items that might be from the 16th century. But they have never found a 16th century English settlement. They have not found a cluster of English graves. They have not found the pottery, the tools, the weapons, the bones of 117 people. Think about it. 117 people. They would have built new homes. They would have farmed. They would have died. They would have buried their dead in the English fashion. They would have left something. Instead, nothing. They evaporated from the historical and archaeological record. The other theories are even weaker. A Spanish attack? The Spanish never found the colony, and they would have boasted of its destruction. A massacre by other hostile tribes? A massacre is a violent, chaotic event. It leaves burned buildings, broken weapons, and mass graves. The scene at Roanoke was sterile, orderly. The Lost Colony is not a mystery of what happened. It is a mystery of how it happened. It is a statistical and historical impossibility. It is a historical 0 point. A moment where a town, a community, and a future were not just lost. They were deleted. From a deleted colony, we travel to a lonely outpost. Our final mystery is a direct parallel to the infamous ghost ship, the Mary Celeste. But this time, the vessel is not a ship. It is a tower of stone, rooted in the earth. This is the mystery of the Flannan Isles lighthouse. December 1900. Eilean Moor, the Big Isle, is a remote, uninhabited rock in the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. It is a place of brutal storms and ancient legends. The brand new lighthouse, a marvel of engineering, is the only sign of human life. Inside are three keepers: Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur. A fourth man, Joseph Moore, is on rotation, back on the mainland. These are experienced, hardened men. They are not prone to fantasy. Their job is monotonous, lonely, and vital. On December 15th, the steamer Archtor, passing on a clear night, noted something impossible. The Flannan light was dark. A report was logged, but action was slow. It wasn't until December 26th, the day after Christmas, that the relief vessel Hesperus arrived at the island, carrying the replacement keeper, Joseph Moore. The island was silent. The landing stage was empty. No one was there to greet them. No provision boxes were waiting to be restocked. Joseph Moore climbed the 160 steep steps from the landing to the lighthouse. He would later say he was overcome with a vague. He arrived at the lighthouse entrance. The main gate and the courtyard door were closed. He entered the lighthouse itself. Inside, the first thing he noticed was the silence. The clocks had stopped. In the kitchen, he found the first signs of interruption. A meal of meat, potatoes, and pickles was laid out on the table, uneaten. A single chair was overturned, as if someone had jumped up from the table in a sudden panic. Moore, now terrified, ran upstairs to the light room. Everything was in order. The lamps were trimmed, the lenses polished, ready to be lit, but cold. He returned to the entrance, and there, he found the central, impossible clue to the entire mystery. On the hook were the men's boots. But of the three sets of oilskins, the heavy, waterproof gear, essential for any venture outside in a Hebridean storm, only one set remained. Two men, Marshall and Ducat, had put on their gear. The third man, Donald MacArthur, had run out without his. This is the 0 point of the Flannan Isles. Why? Why would an experienced, lifelong keeper run out into a ferocious, life-threatening storm without his protective gear? What could he have seen from the kitchen window that would provoke such a suicidal, panicked reaction? The search of the island found nothing. The men were gone. They had vanished from the rock. The official explanation was simple. The men were swept away by a rogue wave. The theory goes that a massive storm hit the island. Marshall and Ducat went out to secure the equipment at the landing stage. They were hit by a wave. MacArthur, seeing this from the lighthouse, ran out to help them, forgetting his coat in his panic, and was swept away in turn. It is a neat theory, but it is full of holes. First, the lighthouse itself is 150 feet above sea level. The damage to the west landing, where they assumed the men were, was severe. But the men had no reason to be there in a storm. Second, the logbook. The lighthouse log was recovered. The entries are strange. On December 12th, Thomas Marshall writes of severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen before, and that James Ducat was very quiet. This is impossible. The weather reports for December 12th, all across the region, were calm. On December 13th, the log notes the storm is still raging. Marshall writes, Ducat, quiet. MacArthur crying. Think about this. 3 hardened lightkeepers, men who chose a life of isolation and tempest, and one of them is crying? The final entry, on December 15th, reads, Storm ended. Sea calm. God is over all. And then, silence. What happened in that tower? What storm were they writing about? If it wasn't the weather outside, was it a psychological storm? A shared madness? Or did they see something? Something so terrifying that it made a veteran keeper weep, and another run to his certain death without his coat. The rogue wave theory doesn't explain the logbook. The madness theory doesn't explain why all three men would go outside. The clues are, once again, mutually exclusive. We are left with an image, an empty room, a stopped clock, a meal getting cold, and a single oilskin coat, hanging on a hook, waiting for a man who will never return. The Dyatlov Pass, the Roanoke Colony, the Flannan Lighthouse. 3 stories, separated by centuries and continents, all ending in the same silent void. These are not just unsolved cases. They are logical black holes. They are 0 points in our official history, where the laws of cause and effect seem to break down. They challenge our most fundamental belief that the world is rational, that reality is stable, and that everything can, eventually, be explained. They are a terrifying reminder that no matter how much we map, no matter how much we track, no matter how much we know, we are still surrounded by the unknown. The true mystery of these cases is not just what happened to these 129 people. It is the chilling realization that it could happen. That the fabric of our world is perhaps thinner than we think. That there are still voids in the map. Voids that can, without warning, open up and swallow us whole. These 3 cases are not just history. They are a warning. And they are the exact kinds of mysteries we are dedicated to exploring. If you believe that our world is still full of profound, unsolved questions, subscribe to 0 Point Lore. We are building a community dedicated to searching for the answers, and we want to hear from you. Of these 3 impossible cases, which one haunts you the most? The frozen terror of Dyatlov Pass? The historical erasure of Roanoke? Or the maritime mystery of the Flannan Lighthouse? Let us know your theories in the comments below.